May the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all, and may the Spirit of the living God fall fresh on us as we begin a new year together in Bible study. Welcome to 2021. 2020 was an interesting year for all of us. We had many wonderful opportunities to learn patience and kindness, to care for others through our compassion. But it was also a time of frustration and sometimes sadness. We weren't able to grieve the loss of some of our loved ones. Many of us found it difficult to reach out to family and friends because we couldn't be together safely. There's still much of that is still a reality in our life, but I have great hope for 2021 and for all the great things God can do for us and through us to allow us to be a light shining in the darkness. So today we're going to be looking at John's Gospel, chapter 1, as he thinks about who God is and who Christ is as he becomes one of us to show us what God is like. Today we're going to be experiencing worship with our students. Our college students have wonderful insights and gifts and talents to share with us to lead us into worship, to help us know better about who God is and how they understand God, so that we might grow in our own faith. Today is also the second Sunday in Christmastide. We tend to rush away from Christmas, but let us not forget that we are still celebrating the 12 days of Christmas as we think about the incarnation of God in the form of a vulnerable baby that was sent to us for salvation and wholeness, to show us how to love. And very soon we'll be experiencing Epiphany, the manifestation of God in our midst that help us know how to be called to live the life God is calling us to live. So in John 1, let's look at this text together. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being through him was life, and he was the life, and the life was the light of all the people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. So this is a beautiful prologue to John's Gospel as he moves beyond our reality to think about Jesus existing beyond and before us. I think one of the best ways we can think of the word, the logos, which is from where we get our word logic. When we think about words are how we communicate our emotions. It's how we communicate what's going on in our heads, what's the deepest feelings of our heart. So it makes sense for John's prologue to think of Jesus as the word, the logos, the word that communicates who God is, how God cares for us, what it meant for God to create us. So that word expresses the mind and the heart of God to us. And it also shows that Jesus was in the beginning. These were the origins. Jesus was not begotten by God. Jesus was always there alongside God. The Word was with God. There's a deep relationship of intimacy there. But even more than that, the Word was God. This speaks to Jesus' divinity, that God becoming flesh came into us, came into this world to show us what God was like. Again, he was in the beginning with God, has always been there, and all things were created through him. Without him, not one thing came into being. So he knows what we are like. He knows everything about us, about the world in which we live, and was there when we came into being as well. And in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. It reminds me of one of my favorite verses from John 10:10, that Jesus says, I came. This is the reason I came. I came that you may have life and have it abundantly, have it to the fullest, so that the light that is the life abundant shines in the darkness of our world, but we know the darkness cannot overcome it. Even when it is darkest, a small light shines and gives rise to the brightness in the world. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to that light, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. So in this text, we go back to John the Baptist and we recognize that he was the precursor to the Messiah. He was the one that pointed to Jesus and said, "This is the light. This is the Christ who has come to us, the light which gives us all light and enlivens us and enlightens us and helps us to shine in this world of darkness. For he was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God." This is a reminder to us of our true identity, the identity that we were created to be children of God. When we receive God, when we believe in his name, he gives us the power to know what we were already created to be, children of God. And when we forget our identity, we forget who God is and who God calls us to be. So we have to remember each and every day. And that's why in the Via Charis, under our baptism section, under water, the spiritual practice for us is to remember each day that we are beloved children of God, because that is easy to forget in a world that calls us to be other things, that tries to convince us that we are not enough unless we have this one product or this one relationship or we follow this one person. Not true. Our true identity is as beloved children of God. The world may not know that yet, but as we shine the light into this world, we can help people recognize who they truly are, who their true identity is, and that will make all the difference. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is the amazing miracle of the incarnation. The Word that was God, that was there at creation, that knows us more intimately than we know ourselves, became flesh just like us and lived among us. I think this is an amazing statement. The Word became flesh states the most theologically attuned understanding of who God is and who Jesus is. This Word that predates all of us and was there at the beginning, who is with God as a partner in creation, in relationship with God, and who is in fact God, has now become human. The NRSV says, lived among us. That seems kind of simple, but it's translating the verb that means to tabernacle among us, to tent, to pitch a tent among us. And we may be more familiar with the story, with the translation, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Or many of us like Eugene Peterson's paraphrase that the Word became flesh and moved into our neighborhood. I like that understanding because it recognizes that Jesus is not somewhere off in the past, but Jesus has come to live among us. And it's up to us to see Jesus in the people that inhabit themselves all around us. Because as we heard in Matthew earlier this year, when we do to the least of these, we are doing unto God, unto Jesus himself. And the people that heard that parable said, "When did we see you?" And so it's important for us to make sure that we see Jesus, because We have seen his glory, it says. The glory is of a Father's only Son, full of grace and full of truth. What a beautiful understanding. This is as much about who God is and what God is about and to what God and to whom God comes as it is an understanding of Jesus. The fourth evangelist, John, understands that it's God's promise to be with God's people forever. The dwelling of God among us is deeply intimate. It shows God's commitment to us. And the flesh dwelling among us, now God goes wherever we go. We don't have to go to some temple. We know that Christ lives within us. It's who we are. And we are full of grace and we're full of truth. And that's how we live our life. Truth is wisdom. Wisdom is love in action. So as we experience grace and truth, we experience that love that is in action, that cares, that is compassionate, that gives everybody a second chance, just as Christ gave us that second chance and saved us from all our mistakes, from all those times we missed the way of Jesus, all the ways we failed to love. In 15, John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me.'" Again, a recognition of the greatness of Jesus the Messiah, who is God. Though we may think of ourselves as having a lot together here and there, our calling is that of John, to say, this can only be done through me because Christ lives in me, and to constantly point to the one who lives within us and who our faith rests on, who is our refuge and our strength. Love this text too. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law was indeed given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I think it's important to know that the word grace is only used 4 times in the entirety of John's gospel, and they're all here in the prologue, full of grace and truth. We have received grace upon grace. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So though we have this all in the prologue, what we have in the rest of John is what that grace looks like when lived out in reality. What it looks like when we ourselves see Jesus living that way, so that we ourselves can follow in his examples and live the grace and truth that came to us through Christ. It will show us what grace looks like and tastes like and smells like, sounds like and feels like. So John's gospel can show us the way. And I love how the prologue ends. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. This is a verse we often forget because we love the one in 14 so much. But this is important for us to know. No one has ever seen God, but Christ, who is close to the Father's heart, Jesus himself, has made him known to us. So if we cannot imagine Jesus doing it, God doesn't do it. When we think of Jesus being loving and kind and gracious and meek and mild and prophetic and challenging those in religious authority and caring for those who were the least of these, those who needed a hand up, when we see that, we know the way of God. We know the way of grace and truth, and we are called to seek to live that way. One of my favorite poems this season, as we move past the Christmas season, is by Howard Thurman, called The Work of Christmas. I've probably quoted it many, many times, but I wanted you to hear it one more time because I think it lays parallel to John's prologue. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins, to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, to make music in the heart. Howard Thurman recognizes the calling each of us has to live the life God is calling us to live, to follow the example that Jesus set for us. We have celebrated God becoming one of us. We have recognized that that happened in the form of a vulnerable baby to poor parents who lived in a know-nothing town. Things were not convenient. We know this time of year that they had to flee to Egypt as refugees so that they could avoid Herod and his violence coming to kill all the children. What a horrible story. But now we move into this wonderful prologue to recognize that Jesus is with us always, that Jesus shows us the character of God, that Jesus comes to show us what life should be like and how to live that each and every day of our lives. That abundant life, that ability to share love and grace and truth and patience and all the things of the fruit of the Spirit with those closest to us and those all around the world. So this year, as we enter into a new year, 2021, my hope for us all is that we live this way of Jesus, that we seek to grow deeper into our kindness and our patience, which is being tested a lot, that we become loving toward everyone, that we try to resist saying anything that diminishes the worth of another human being, but instead lifts up those who are most in need, those who are broken and lost and are hungry, those who need to hear the words of peace that we have to give them, so that we can rebuild, repair all the brokenness around us, and make music in the heart this season and forevermore. So may God be with you. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord pour out his heart upon you and grant you peace. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. Amen.